Like, what do you even call this? You call this like Catholic core, like Bible punk, Christo punk, maybe science Christian, like sci-cry. Please join me in getting hyped for Corvus Belli's new action pack release, Bakunin Observance, now up for pre-order. Roll the intro and pump that gospel, baby. Welcome to Corner Case, the channel for wargamers by wargamers. You're in the hobby corner with myself, your host, your man of the collar, your best friend, Deck. So Bakunin Observance, Corvus Belli's new subfaction relaunch, is really following this pattern of bigger and better releases, which is so great to see. Actually, I just wanted to get stoked about like the new toys, but I am very optimistic and hopeful that because these launches are getting better, that there are more of you new players out there. And to service that hope and that optimism, I will be talking about a little bit more than just the toys. I'll be going a little bit into the lore and the background of the subfaction as well. Just like starting off by watching this trailer video, like, oh my God, so cool. I think the first time we saw this was Operation Blackwind of last year, where they 3D scanned in the minis and then put them in that 3D environment, which I just love that because you get like so much flavor for the pound. You get that better choreographed camera work around the models, which is like almost impossible when you're filming like physically. And you just get so much flavor. Like, I love the detail of that sci-fi-ification of the stained glass in the back. That's kind of like the neon sign, the back of this cathedral. So, oh my God, so much flavor. Love it. And like the rest of the art direction too. So like Observance has its own font, which I know that like some sectorials do, but they don't do it all the time. So that's just like even more flavor. And I know that a lot of Infinity, well, they make logos and heraldry for like every unit in the game. But I think especially the later stuff, the newer stuff is really, really good. You know, by that I mean, if you look again at Steel Phalanx from Blackwind from last year, they've got like that greater focus on the eye symbol. And I think that eye symbol is really clear and really lends itself to freehand work on the miniature. And I think the same thing about like the Observance lattice. You can kind of tell on the model here that, you know, it's in the sculpt, so you won't have to worry about it on like some of the reverence. But if you wanted to freehand it, it's like definitely lends itself to being freehanded. So pretty cool art direction for the faction identity. And of course, the new sculpts. We gotta talk about the toys. Oh, my holy emperor of mankind. But before we do, let's take a quick break from the sermon and thank our Patreon. I'd like to extend a big Corner Case thank you to all of our supporters on Patreon. You are what make this channel possible. And an extended thank you to everyone who supports the channel in non-monetary ways. Building community is absolutely the best part of the hobby. Back to the show. Let's zoom out. What even is all of this stuff? What is Bakunin Observance? So Bakunin itself is a sub-faction of the greater Nomads faction in Infinity, the game, and Observance is a part of Bakunin, which makes it kind of like a sub-faction, which makes this launch a little interesting. It's kind of like if they released Blackwind last year, and instead of just selling like Steel Phalanx, they did like Steel Phalanx, but specifically UD and the boys, you know? So it's a very distinct sub-faction within Nomads, but I think it's because Corvus Belli seems to favor Observance, and I'll read this passage from the lore here. Nomads believe that freedom does not and cannot exist within the panoptic confines of an Aleph-controlled datasphere. As an alternative, they have created their own independent network, Arachne. The cyber wizards of Tunguska, in alliance with the avant-garde programmers of Bakunin, the security experts of Corregidor, and the cyber witches of Observance, designed a networking protocol modeled on the neuronal patterns of the saints and martyrs of early Christianity. Arachne is a quantronic Gnosticism built on irrational syllogisms and logical sequences based on faith and mysticism, which are inherently antithetical to an artificial intelligence like Aleph. The result, particularly when combined with the paranoid firewalls and security systems of its isolated nodes, is slower than Maya, but significantly more secure. Thank you to our friend Warlore over at Warlore for helping us find some of this information. You can check out Warlore if you want to know more about Infinity world building. Check them out, link in the description below. So you can kind of see in the passage that I read that Observance is like treated like a sectorial, but it's also like not. Like it's mentioned in the same breath as like Corregidor, Tunguska, Bakunin, but it's also like not in italics. So I think this definitely, all this to say that I think they're being treated special because Corvus Belli likes them. And to zoom out again for some of you newer players, what Nomads is, Nomads is like a fleet of ships, and each major ship is a sectorial within that faction. The greater faction identity is, definitely like freedom is like a really big value there. They're really anti-Aleph. Which is like the big data processing AI for all of the human sphere, except Nomads are like kind of anti that. And like of the three major ships, Corregidor, Tunguska, Bakunin is like kind of the more chaotic, individualistic, eclectic, anarchic kind of one. And so Observance kind of exists within that context of like people who do body modifications and like do whatever they want. You go up like the furries, like Uberfall Commando, and a Morlock group, which is like absolutely the body mod people. And so Observance, looks like it's like oxymoronic because it's this like strict religious kind of thing inside of that crazy situation, but it kind of fits in being weird, and they're all weird together. So Observance's main purpose in the lore is it's kind of like the most extreme military version of Nomad's anti-Aleph sentiments. And again, Aleph being Aleph being the single massive AI that oversees the data network of the human sphere and most international technological systems. Got that one from Human Sphere, so I wanted to be accurate. So as a reminder, Nomads as a whole kind of see Aleph as this like form of extreme social control. And again, they value freedom. So they're super anti that. And Observance is like the spearhead to fight that. And you can kind of see that in the trailer as well. They allude to that. Let's again refer to the lore. Let's read a passage here. Any datasphere that doesn't have network neutrality is an implement of societal control, full stop. If your datasphere isn't treating all data that passes through it equally, then you have to assume that it's using that power to influence you. So who wields the power? In Maya, it's Aleph. And what exactly does Aleph want? Interesting question, isn't it? Are you confident you know the answer? No? Then you need an open, neutral, and free datasphere. You need Arachne. Let's finally get into the toys. So I love the new models. Previously, Observance was only represented as the Reverend models, like Reverend Moira's, healers, and hackers? The Reverend models, and they were straight up just like nuns with guns, which I think they were probably polarizing even when they came out back then, but they probably couldn't release that type of thing now, like they're scantily clad, and yet that somehow is armor 3. They still got the combat heals. So the design didn't really age well. And I think this new update is probably a pretty good one. You can kind of see that the armor is a little bit better represented. There's like a more diversity of like shapes and skin tones, and the combat heals are mostly gone. So I think this is probably a meaningful update. I think one more nuanced or less noticeable improvement is the way scale is treated. I think so. This is not only a Corvus Belli issue from the past, but I think a lot of war games in the past treated kind of the difference in scale between male and female models as like huge. So like in Steel Phalanx, you get like a model like big boy, like Ajax, who's like the size of a tag almost. But then like any female model is going to be like tiny. So I think they definitely improved that. Part of it is like with the new sculpts, they've been like a little bit more, I think Trad Wargaming would call it heroic scale, where the feet and the hands are like a little bigger. But overall, they've just been chunkier proportioned. So I think the bigger change in scale so that there's not so big of a difference between male and female models, I think is a really great improvement that's not as noticeable unless you're specifically looking at Agatha and the Sin Eater. Like a decade ago, you couldn't even make a model like Agatha, I don't think. I don't think most games would think to make that. So I think it's like a really big improvement. Like I think Agatha is like an absolutely sick model that, thank God, we can have that type of thing now. And if we talk about the Sin Eaters are the only biologically male part of the observance. Observance delineates traditionally between female and male biologies, but they are still in line with Bakunin's like kind of cultural and technological zeitgeist of being not only accepting of, but like conducive to body modifications, and that would include like transitioning and also like whatever gender expression. So it looks rigid at face value, but you can make your changes and there's no judgment. And if you look at the Sin Eater model from like the original one, that thing is like chonky, and that's another thing that supports my statement of like in the past, like the male models were like huge and the female models were like tiny. So now they kind of like brought the Sin Eater in line to being like almost like a little, you know, like less heroic posture, a little bit rounded shoulder compared to like the heroic looking Reverend model. So pretty cool. One unit I'm super excited about is the Reverend Cenobite. It's got everything we want. It's got the sweet, sweet mimetism. It's got that heavy rocket launcher. It looks like an absolute heavy infantry, which is always the type of infantry you like to see on the tabletop. Most of my playtime, as you know, is with Steel Phalanx, so I'm looking at this thing and I'm like comparing it with a Phoenix. But you know, the minor differences in design like really do make a big impact on how you play them. You know, Steel Phalanx usually like 4/4 move, quick access to smoke, eclipse smoke. Then you got the Cenobite, which is like 6/2 move, like from what I can see, if I'm not reading it wrong, like no access to smoke within its fire team, but you can like have Agatha in tow, which is like, so then you got 2 beat sticks and a good gun, and at least, and I feel like this Harris can definitely own the fuck out of the mid board, so I'm like super excited to floor it with the Cenobite fire team. One thing I will also mention is I love that a bunch of these models are exclusive to Bakunin. I've been pretty vocal on the channel and elsewhere that I think sectorials are a really great way to play Infinity. I highly prefer it over vanilla just from the standpoint of the faction identity is way stronger. I like the game design when each sectorial has like such sharp disadvantages and advantages. And finally, the piece de resistance, the Stigmata, the new tag coming out for Bakunin Observance. Oh my god. So last year I did collect a lizard. I've been slowly chipping away at it. I got the lizard because it was so ugly, but like in a good way. There was so much going wrong, but there was also something really right about it. The lizard, I think, is, of the old tags, probably the best one. It's not like the Marut, where I look at the old Marut and I like there's like a little bit of embarrassment. There's like something about the lizard that looks like it's got like an old school cool to it, yet it's so ugly. And the Stigmata is like a great update to it. It's got like, it's kept a lot of the great things about the lizard, and I'm confident they're gonna look like a good family together. Like it's got the snatched waist and the big ass hips. It's got the way too long arms that end in claws. It's got like the no face, beehive face kind of situation going on. So the Stigmata I am super hyped about, and that's even before we figure like what's going on the table, where like this is a tag that hacks, so it's like precedent breaking. This tag is awesome. Anyway, this video is getting pretty long. I actually have a lot more to say about Bakunin Observance, but we'll be picking that up in subsequent videos. What did you think? Are you picking up this sectorial? Are you super stoked? Do you like Sisters of Battle? Does that matter to you? And are you a new player? If you're a new player, was there stuff that you wanted to know more about? Thank you again to Warlore for help finding all this information. Thank you to our supporters over on Patreon. Thank you for all of you on the Discord. Join us on the Discord. Like, subscribe, comment, please. See you later.
Only in death does subscribing end!